Let's say that first thing in the morning, I end up going to the washroom, I take a shit, and I lose a pound from taking that shit. Well, all of a sudden now I'm 168 pounds, so by taking that shit, I am not overweight anymore. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10 reasons the BMI scale is bullshit. But before I start, you guys know the drill. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, ding ding ding. And if you don't want to watch the entire video, I will be including timestamps in the description so you can skip ahead to the section that you want. Now on to the topic at hand. Yesterday I did a video, and in that video I discussed the BMI scale. So I decided that I would elaborate on it a little bit more in today's video. And since I know how much you guys love top 10 videos, I decided to come up with a little neat list of 10 reasons why the BMI scale is bullshit. Just a quick note on the BMI scale, if you don't know what it is essentially a height to weight ratio, which makes it incredibly problematic. So I'm going to list for you now the top 10 reasons why the BMI scale is bullshit. The number one reason why the BMI scale is bullshit is that it's incredibly outdated. The BMI scale was created by Adolphe Quetelet, and he was a Belgian astronomer and mathematician, and he developed it sometime between 1830 and 1850. So the BMI scale is almost 200 years old, which is absolutely astounding. When you think of all the scientific and technological advancements that have occurred over the course of the last 200 years, it's amazing that we are still using this outdated and very flawed metric to determine rates of obesity in 2020. The number two reason why the BMI scale is bullshit is that the formula is problematic. The way that the BMI scale is used is they basically take your mass in kilograms and they divide that number by your height in meters squared. And because you are squaring the height, it is going to be very problematic for individuals who are either very, very tall or very, very short. I'm not talking about individuals who are slightly taller than average or slightly shorter than average. We're talking about statistical outliers. Let's say you are somebody who is above 6.5 feet tall or you are below 4 feet. Well, if you are very, very short, because you are squaring the height, what is going to happen is you may be listed as either underweight or normal weight when you may in fact actually be either overweight or obese. And the opposite is going to be true for very, very tall people. If you are very, very tall, you may get a BMI reading that is going to show you as overweight obese, where you might actually be either normal weight or even underweight. The number three reason why the BMI scale is bullshit is that you can go from normal weight to overweight in minutes. There's four broad classifications when it comes to the BMI scale. There is underweight, normal weight or ideal weight, and then overweight and obese. When it comes to the actual scale itself, if you have a BMI score below 18.5, you are considered underweight. If you have a BMI scale between 18.5 to 24.9, you are going to be considered normal weight or being ideal weight. If you have a BMI score of 25 to 29.9, you are going to be considered overweight. And if you have a BMI score of 30 or more, you are going to be considered obese. Now, within obesity, there are different classes. Basically, every multiple of 5 is going to be a different class of obesity. So you have 30 to 34.9, that's class 1 obesity. 35 to 39.9, that's going to be class 2 obesity. And 40 plus is going to be considered class 3 obesity. Class 3 obesity was formerly referred to as severe obesity, and it was also formerly referred to as morbidly obese up until recently when that term hasn't really been used as much. But those are the different categories. And because these different categories hinge on a single decimal place, depending on your weight, you can fluctuate in between the different categories within a few minutes. As an example, I am 5'9". At 5'9", if I were to weigh 168 pounds, my BMI score would be 24.8. At 24.8, that would be considered normal weight. Now, if I were to put on just 1 pound, at 5'9", 169 pounds, I would all of a sudden be classified as overweight. So you can go from being normal weight to being overweight just by consuming one meal, which makes absolutely zero sense. And the opposite is true. You can go from overweight to normal weight just within a matter of a few seconds. Let's say I wake up in the morning, and again, I'm 5'9", and I weigh 169 pounds. That will give me a BMI score of 25.0. Let's say that first thing in the morning, I end up going to the washroom, I take a shit, and I lose a pound from taking that shit. Well, all of a sudden now I'm 168 pounds. So by taking that shit, I am not overweight anymore because now my BMI score is 24.8 and I am now of normal weight. Now, the number 4 reason why the BMI scale is bullshit is that it implies that weight is the only factor in determining health risks. There are plenty of reasons why someone may be at risk for certain diseases, and weight is not going to be the only factor. The problem with the BMI scale is it doesn't take into account things like, are you a smoker? Do you drink a lot? Are you very, very inactive? And by neglecting all of these very pertinent pieces of information, it's missing a big piece of the picture by solely focusing on your weight. And by solely focusing on your weight, it does have that implication that if you lower your weight, you can get into the normal or ideal weight category, and then you could be a healthier individual. But that simply isn't the case. You can be in the overweight or obese category and still be very, very healthy, and you can be in the normal weight category and have tons of health diseases. Just as an example, myself, for those of you who've been watching my videos, you know that back in 2010, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. Now, my weight right now, I fall within the normal category, but let's say I was having issues with ulcerative colitis right now and I was in a really big flare. My BMI score would show that I am at a healthy weight, but it wouldn't give me any information in terms of how exactly I'm feeling. It wouldn't have any information with regard to what types of diseases, what types of conditions somebody has, and all these factors that play a more important role in determining somebody's health risks than just solely focusing on their weight. The number 5 reason why the BMI scale is bullshit is that it was developed for sedentary individuals. When Adolf Quetelet developed the BMI scale, the way that he created it was to determine the rates of obesity in sedentary individuals. So if you are a sedentary individual and your height falls somewhere within the normal range, then you may be able to use the BMI scale with some degree of accuracy. However, it's still not going to be the most accurate metric that you can use. If you are someone who is very, very active, you work out a lot, you are somebody like an athlete, then it's not going to be very effective at determining rates of obesity. Same thing with special populations like children and the elderly. However, if you are a sedentary individual and you are going by the BMI scale, you may be able to use it with a fair degree of accuracy, but even then I wouldn't really put too much faith in the BMI scale because it doesn't take into account so many other factors that are going to be more important than just looking at your weight. By focusing solely on your weight, it can lead you to become hyper-focused on the number that is on the scale, and by solely focusing on the number that is on the scale, it can lead to some unhealthy eating practices like extreme calorie restrictions and also eliminating certain types of foods. So even if you are a sedentary individual and your BMI is showing that you are overweight or obese, don't pay too much attention just to the number on the scale because there are other factors than just your weight that will play a role when determining your risk for different health conditions. Now, the number 6 reason why the BMI scale is bullshit ties into reason number 5, and that is it does not account for activity level. If you are somebody who is very, very active, if you're somebody who works out a lot, then you're not really going to get an accurate reading when it comes to your BMI score, because if you do have a lot of muscle weighs more than fat. So the more muscle you have on your frame, the higher your BMI score is going to be. And by having a higher BMI score, that can lump you into an incorrect category. It may put you in an overweight category or obese when you're actually of a normal, healthy weight. Which brings us to the number 7 reason why the BMI scale is bullshit, and that is it doesn't differentiate between lean mass and fat mass. The only thing that matters when you are looking at a BMI scale is what is your height and what is your weight. But in terms of your actual body composition, it doesn't take into account how much muscle do you have, how much water do you have, how much do your bones weigh. All of these different factors are going to play a role in determining your health status. So by solely focusing on your weight and not paying attention to what percentage of that weight is lean mass and what percentage of that weight is fat mass, then you're not really going to get a very good picture of what exactly is going on internally, and you're not really going to know exactly what you need to do to be able to improve your health markers. I'm just going to quickly pop a picture up of me up right over here. These pictures that you're about to see, this is me when I was at my absolute heaviest. A few years ago, I was really into powerlifting and I wanted to get as big as possible so I could lift the most amount of weight possible. And in doing so, I managed to get my weight up to 177 pounds. Now, for myself, at 5'9", 177 pounds, my BMI score was 26 point something, which put me in the overweight category. Now, without using the BMI scale, just using your own eyes, you can use common sense, look at that picture and tell that no, I was not overweight, I just had a decent amount of muscle on my frame for my height. So by not taking into account things like how much lean mass do you have versus how much fat mass, it's an incredibly inaccurate picture of what exactly is going on with an individual. If you are somebody who's very, very muscular, chances are your BMI score is going to put you in an overweight or obese category. Just take a look at any professional athlete. I work with a lot of professional athletes, and I would say 80 to 90% of the athletes that I train would be in the overweight or obese category if they were to go by the BMI scale. But none of those, out of those 80 to 90%, none of them are actually overweight or obese. The reason that they show up as overweight or obese is because they have a lot of muscle on their frame. If you take any professional athlete, chances are they are going to show up as overweight or obese because most professional athletes are going to have more muscle mass on their frame than the average population. And because the BMI scale does not differentiate between levels of lean mass and levels of fat mass, this is one of the reasons why it makes it incredibly inaccurate. Now, the number 8 reason why the BMI scale is bullshit is that it doesn't differentiate between types of fat. We have two main types of fat in our body. We have visceral fat and we have subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous fat, that is the fat that we store underneath our skin. And while it may be unappealing to look at if you are somebody who is trying to achieve a really high level of leanness, it's not going to be problematic in terms of health risks. If you get above a certain point, then yes, it will become problematic, but in general, subcutaneous fat isn't going to be a good predictor for health risks. Whereas with visceral fat is the fat that is stored in our abdominal cavity, and that is the fat that surrounds all of our vital organs. Because it surrounds our vital organs, this is going to be the much more problematic fat in our bodies. The problem with the BMI scale, aside from the fact that it doesn't even take into account fat mass versus lean mass, it also doesn't take into account the different types of fat that we have in our body. You may have a very, very high body fat percentage, but if all of your body fat is predominantly subcutaneous fat, you don't really have too many concerns when it comes to things like cardiovascular risk, diabetes, and all these other different factors. Whereas if you have a lot of visceral fat compared to your subcutaneous fat, that is going to be much more problematic because the more visceral fat that you have, the higher your risk is going to be when it comes to things like developing type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and different types of health conditions. And this is one of the reasons why women tend to outlive men. If you look at fat deposits between men and women, generally speaking, women are going to store fat in their hips and thighs, and men are going to store more fat in their abdominal region. Because men store more fat in their abdominal region, that means that while women do have a higher percentage of body fat relative to men, the levels of visceral fat is going to be higher in men relative to women. So while women have a higher body fat percentage, men have a higher percentage of visceral fat, and the visceral fat is one of the factors in determining health risks and one of the reasons why men tend to die more prematurely than women. Now, this isn't the only factor. There are several factors that will go into determining life expectancy, but it is one factor in determining life expectancy, and it is one of the reasons why men don't live as long as women. Now, the number 9 reason why the BMI scale is bullshit is that it is a poor predictor for health risks. Multiple studies have compared BMI to things like waist circumference, waist to height ratio, waist to hip ratio, and all of them have pretty much concluded that all of these metrics that I just listed are far superior at determining health risks than something like the BMI scale. With the BMI scale, it's very a poor indicator at determining things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and all-cause mortality, whereas things like a weight to height ratio, this is going to be one of the best predictors at determining cardiovascular disease risk and all-cause mortality risk. Now, a couple other things are going to be waist circumference and also waist to hip ratio. There was a massive study done. This study was performed on over 82,000 individuals, and it was performed over 9 nationwide British cohorts. And what they found in this study, they found that waist circumference was associated with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. And waist to hip ratio showed the highest magnitude of association when it came to cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. Whereas BMI showed very poor association with both, and it was actually inversely related with all-cause mortality. So if you are trying to determine somebody's risk for different health conditions, using the BMI scale is going to be very, very ineffective and inaccurate, and you're going to be much better off at using something like either waist circumference, waist to height ratio, or waist to hip ratio. And one of the reasons why waist circumference, waist to height ratio, and waist to hip ratio are going to be much more effective at determining risk factors such as cardiovascular disease and diabetes is because of the point that I brought up earlier in number 8, and that is the different types of fat. If you have a larger stomach, what's going to happen is you are generally going to have more visceral fat in your system. And because you have more visceral fat, that is going to put you in a higher risk category for developing things like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and different types of health-related conditions. So, By using something like waist circumference, waist to height ratio, and waist to hip ratio, that is going to be a much better predictor of health risks as opposed to using something like the BMI scale, which is a very, very poor indicator of different health risks. And that brings us to the number 10 reason why the BMI scale is bullshit, and that is it yields no pertinent information. If you have a BMI score that shows you as being overweight or as being obese, okay, that's great. I know I'm overweight, I know I'm obese. What am I going to do with that information? It doesn't tell you anything about what you need to actually do. Do you need to work out more? Do you need to eat less? Do you need to stop smoking, stop drinking? There are tons of reasons why you may be overweight. There are tons of reasons why your health may be in jeopardy. And just having this number telling you that you're overweight or underweight isn't giving you any information that you could actually use and put to good use to help you to improve your health markers. In fact, something as simple as a lifestyle questionnaire would be much more effective at determining health risks for somebody than something like the BMI scale. If you were to go through something like a lifestyle questionnaire, you could ask questions about, do you smoke? How much do you smoke a day? Do you drink? How much do you drink per day? Do you work out? What do you eat? Are you getting adequate amounts of sleep? Are you very, very stressed out? Questions such as these will actually yield pertinent information, and going based off of those questions, you can then know what somebody has to do to improve their health. If they are somebody who is drinking a lot, then you know that they need to cut back on their alcohol consumption. If somebody is a smoker and smokes a lot, then you know that they have to cut back on their smoking. If somebody does not work out, you can recommend that they start implementing some type of exercise program, and so on and so forth with all the different questions. And those are just a few of the reasons why the BMI scale is bullshit. So if you are trying to improve your health and you get told that you are overweight or obese because you have a high BMI score, don't put too much faith into that score, because there's way more to improving your health and finding out whether you are going to be at risk for certain diseases than your BMI score. That's pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.